Hello dear students. Now in this advanced course we will begin with the first class, in which we will be talking about the two units, the unit 1 and unit 2. In a very brief and also anticipating the certain range of questions which will be there in terms of this. The class schedule has been there with you, and in this class schedule we find about the two units, that is in terms of modernity in Europe and emergence of sociology, and then sociology as a science. So from the first paper, today in a very brief we will be talking about the two units, and then tomorrow we will be picking up not only the theoretical stands from where the questions have started coming out, we will also be talking about the methodological dimension, that is unit 3. Now when we are looking at the entire sociology, the first unit that begins, that is basically sociology. As a discipline. Most of you who are there in terms of advanced course, the basics have been done with you. We will try to understand not only the basics, we will also be rebrushing our conceptual clarity, and we will be looking at the certain nature of questions. And let me say it, that the class schedule which has been provided, that is of 20 days, it may be possible that 1 or 2 days it would be extended, provided your comfortability and your understanding is the prime concern. And now here when we are looking at, let us look at the certain dimensions from there. We will open it up. Here we are talking about modernity in Europe. It is, when we say Europe, we are more concerned of the Western Europe, and the emergence of sociology. Now when I look at the syllabus, modernity, Europe, emergence of sociology, our basic concern is all those changes, the consequent changes which Western Europe witnessed, having a transition from pre-modern to modern. And in this light, how sociology is a discipline that found its genesis, that found its need, that is the concern of us. And once we have done this one, then we need to talk about the scope of sociology. And once we have done formalistic and synthetic view, then we will be looking at relationship with other social sciences. 5. And then This is tentatively the units which is there in Unit 1, Sociology discipline. And where we are living in a sociology of common sense, from there we will be picking up the Unit 2, that is Sociology as science. Slowly and gradually we will be looking at. Let me first begin with this, that when we are looking at sociology, sociology discipline emerged in 1838, whose foundation was laid down by the French scholar Auguste Comte, on the basis of the hybrid origin, hybrid terms, Latin socius and Greek logos. Socius, society, broadly, and logos, either you can pick up the meaning of science or study. Thus, etymologically, going by the words, going by the origin, sociology emerged as a study of society or scientific study of society. And very knowingly I am making the sentence that it emerged as a scientific study of society. Because most of you whosoever has gone through sociology, and when we started going through the basics, the very premise on which sociology developed was that as the natural scientists are discovering the natural laws, can there be possibility to search and establish the social laws, to study the society scientifically? Thus the very nature, right from the beginning, the nature of sociology seems to be scientific. And thus time and again I have said, the debate in sociology is not whether sociology is a science or not. The debate is on the methodological use, that whether the methods of natural science be applied or do we need some other methods. And that way the debate on positivism and non-positivism will begin. This line has to be remembered by us. That when we look at sociology, sociology is basically a social product, an intellectual framework, which found its genesis in the socio-historical conditions of Western Europe. And when we say socio-historical conditions of Western Europe, then how the Western Europe started witnessing certain transition from the pre-modern stage to the modern stage. And thus, one by one we will be picking up. That when you look at here, I am talking about that it is a social product. It is an intellectual framework. Genesis in socio-historical condition Western Europe. That socio-historical condition of Western Europe, which started witnessing a transition from pre-modern to modern. What this transition that has started emerging out? Broadly, when you look at the transitions, then we started witnessing the transition from agrarian to industrial. Feudalism being replaced. Industries coming out. critical introspection toward the medieval customs, religion, and primacy to the reason. It means when you look in the transition is taking place from agrarian to industrial, from feudal to capitalism, from religion to reason, and also from democracy, from monarchy to democracy. Now these changes which are taking place, they now are requiring the new kind of analysis, they are requiring new kind of explanation. The old explanation being tied to land started proving inadequate. And in this very perspective, ultimately in 1838, sociology emerged, whose foundation was laid down by Auguste Comte, the French scholar, on the basis of two, Socius and Logos. Thus, it is scientific study of society. That's why I said that sociology developed on the premise that akin to the natural science, which is discovering the natural laws to understand the natural phenomena, the social laws to study society scientifically could be developed and could be established. In this very perspective, we will be finding about the genesis of positivism as well, which we will be picking up in Unit 2. And we will be looking at the certain tenets of the positivism as well. Though it is also true that as sociology institutionalizes, as sociology evolves, where debate intensifies in terms of methodology, debate intensifies in terms of its nature and its scope. But here when you are looking at, when I said that changes are taking place, and the changes are there in terms of feudalism being replaced, monarchy was challenged, theological doctrines were critically introspected, urbanization was taking place, industries were being set up, and thus this transition from pre-modern to modern has brought the consequent changes. In an earlier video I said that when you are looking at the modernity, then here we need to look at the modernity in terms of what, how, and what are the components. In a very simple sentence, if I make a line, that modernity is those cognitive structural changes which came to be associated with urban, literate societies of Europe. So we are also looking at the transition from rural to urban. And those cognitive, the perception, and the structural changes that could be witnessed. And here, in terms of this, when you look at what modernity is all about, then we first need to define modernity. What? How to view it? This is yet another dimension that we need to understand. That modernity broadly has been viewed from the three perspectives. That is, how to view it. And what are the components? And once we have talked about what are the components, Then we'll be looking at the consequent changes, within which we'll be looking at emergence of sociology. And here I said that those cognitive structural changes that came to be associated with urban, industrial, literate society of Europe. And once it started emerging out, bringing about the cognitive structural changes, institutional changes in a society, then how to view it? So the first part that view it, that modernity is as an idea. It is a philosophical dimension which basically asks to have rapture with the past. What is the rapture with the past? What was gone, gone. Now the new perspectives have emerged out, the new changes have emerged out. These new changes are to be critically analyzed. Society is witnessing certain problems. Some new challenges have emerged out. Some dislocations have emerged out. They need to be addressed. The present society which is there, has nothing to do with the past. So the moment few started viewing modernity as an idea, they basically asked that there must be a rapture with the past. Though few started looking at it as an experience, that those changes which are emerging out, it is also bringing certain kind of experiences what the people are witnessing. As an experience, it has started talking about the socio-psychological dimension. To forget with which you are known, and to forget with which what you are known. So it basically brought certain kind of to forget with which man was known. Everything. It also brought certain kind of psychological crisis. Let me say it very categorically, that broadly I am talking all the things. Any one of you who needs certain kind of notes, certain kind of perspective, just pass on the message so that it could be uploaded by, I'll ask them, I'll supply them something so that it would be uploaded, and I'll let you know that from where the questions have come out. But here your understanding is more important one. It also brought a certain kind of psychological crisis. But few were more concerned of that modernity is an empiricality. So as an empiricality, within which the social cultural, economic and political changes that were witnessed, which could be witnessed, the focus shifted to that one. It is the empirical dimension. And in this very perspective, how the new social classes are emerging out, how the old values are dissipating, the new values are coming out. The movement is we are witnessing from religion to reason, freeing people from the medieval grip of the medieval traditions, customs, and focusing more on the reason. At economic, we started looking at the decline of feudalism, coming up of industries, urbanization is spreading up, and in a political system we started witnessing that how monarchies are being challenged. More precisely, if you look at the French Revolution, it brought a change from the monarchy to democracy. And thus, the changes which we started looking at in a social to cultural to economic and political, they become the empirical base to analyze modernity. In this basis, what were the components which have brought the changes? The moment you start looking at the components, enlightenment. However, let me say that when you talk about enlightenment as one of the greatest component of modernity, which brought about a transition, quantitative, qualitative changes in Western Europe, you also need to look at from here Renaissance, the rebirth, the intellectual upheaval, the 13th and 14th century, from where in Italy we started looking at the Renaissance. The changes which started coming with the Renaissance got a new direction with the emergence of enlightenment, a critical phase of critical reasoning. Critical introspections of tradition, religion, and in between also emerged the development of science. When talking science, we are talking about the natural science. Now, right from Galileo to others, some new scientific discoveries are emerging out. And these new scientific discoveries are challenging the prophecies of the church. It means the pre-modern society which was gripped by the great chain of being. Remember this line, beta, word, concept. Great chain of being. When I say great chain of being, it is basically a theological doctrine, theological religious one, which provided hierarchical gradation to every animate and inanimate object. Every living, non-living objects, all had the certain hierarchical gradations professed and propagated by religion, upheld by church. And you all know that at the moment you started looking at, you find about that how When the Galileo and others started coming out with the scientific discoveries, challenging the certain kind of prophecies of the church, either some were prosecuted, some were arrested, some's work has been put in the forbidden index of the church. But the motion of science that once started coming out, it has now started providing new perspective to look at the phenomena. Tentatively, religion is gaining momentum over religion. And this great chain of being, God, followed by man, the angels, then by man, at the bottom of the hierarchy was a rock. That's why once again I am saying, this theological doctrine of the great chain of being provided the hierarchical gradation of every animate and inanimate object. Propagated, upheld by the church. Now once this developments started emerging out, the intellectual upheaval started emerging out, now this great chain of being is being challenged. And once when we are looking at it, how this great chain is being challenged, then one of the major component from where we started looking at the new thought process, that is from the perspective of the 13th century, from when the Renaissance came out. I said Renaissance is an intellectual upheaval. It started a new direction to change and progress. Though it literally means rebirth, which started reviving the classical learning and wisdom. It witnessed the discovery of the new continents, decline of feudal system, and growth of commerce. It tried to free people from the grip of the medieval religion and convention. I repeat, it tried to free people from the grip of medieval religion and convention. And once in the 16th century, when the development of science, natural science started emerging out, the scientists started discovering the certain kind of natural laws, a new perspective to look at the natural phenomena, in which many of them had gone against the theological doctrine of church. The critical introspection started emerging out. Empiricality became, reason became the vocation of mankind. And not only this, the very idea that God is the supreme creator of the universe, people also started looking at this statement very skeptically. The nature of God, or the idea of God expressed by the law of nature to be discovered. Idea of God expressed by the law of nature to be discovered. And who will discover? The man. Man is the best creation of God. Now this idea of God to be discovered by the law of nature, by the man, changes have started emerging out. Will be resisted by the church. But the momentum of change that has initiated, that has come, that will move. If I could quote Leonardo da Vinci, he says, reason is the only unbreakable law governing nature. And only through efficient reasoning, secrets of nature could be unfolded. Religion is not the unbreakable law. Reason is the unbreakable law. Now look at the change which I am talking about. That's why I said that the medieval Europe, which was basically gripped by the conventions, the traditions, religious, theological doctrine in which the great chain of being was propagated, upheld. Now the new views are coming out with the emergence of science, with the Renaissance. And this very progressive direction that was initiated by Renaissance witnessed a new kind of lease of life with the Enlightenment. The momentum which was initiated by Renaissance got a new direction with the emergence of Enlightenment in 17th and 18th century. The idea surfaced that the God, reason, nature and humanity all are synthesized. We need to celebrate reason. It is a critical reaction against tradition and religion. The scientific temperament was promoted. One of the greatest scholars of Enlightenment, Immanuel Kant, sapre audre, have the courage to think. Every human has a reasoning faculty. We will have to use it. And we need to have that courage to think, to reason. It established, propagated that celebration of reason to understand the universe, and it should become the key sentence in terms of knowledge, freedom, happiness, rationality. It started being emphasized. It provided a critical introspection, critical reaction. It is strongly emphasized that neither the knowledge of nature nor the self-knowledge could be derived from obedience to tradition and authority, thereby leading to a revolutionary rupture in the traditional thought process. Now I repeat the line. Neither the knowledge of nature nor the self-knowledge could be derived from obedience to tradition and authority, which is leading to the rupture with the traditional thought process. René Descartes argued that the rationalistic control over the phenomena could be obtained through rigorous use of mathematical methods and not through blind obedience to tradition. Similarly, with the emergence of modern science, following the Renaissance, modern science and Enlightenment, now the new changes are emerging out. Reason is becoming the major dimension. And then, apart from this, Industrial Revolution. It is yet another component which brought about a quantitative, qualitative changes. However, whenever you need to talk about this, sometimes they ask you sociology as a byproduct of Industrial Revolution. Remember, in Industrial Revolution, you need to focus on individualism. And when you focus on the French Revolution, yet another component of modernity, your focus should be on the word collectivism. So, Industrial Revolution, individualism. French Revolution, collectivism. Now, in this very perspective, when you are looking at the Industrial Revolution, it began around 1760s in Britain. It brought a greater change in the socio-economic life of the people. It later on took place in other countries of Europe and then in other continents. Consequently, trade, commerce, the flow of goods and services, which were basically produced for the domestic use, were produced on the larger scale for the market. Thereby bringing the quantitative, qualitative changes in the socio-economic life of the people. In Britain, when looking at the industrialization, it came without government assistance and the bourgeois, the middle class. In England, became able to achieve the economic and ideological hegemony, by virtue of which they also extended their influence on the political field. The machine-based production started. Systematic organization of production began. And ultimately this all gave way to the factory system of production. Thus the change from the agrarian to industrial, from feudal to capitalist system of production took place, within which the classes of people, the owner of capital, the owner of labor, the social classes diversified. Large scale production began, the quantitative changes, positive quantitative changes started emerging out. The life of the quality of the life of the people improved. However, it also brought a certain kind of challenges. Right from the overcrowding to the unemployment to the poverty in urban areas, slums, exploitation of the workers, some challenges also started emerging out. When they ask you, sociology is a byproduct of Industrial Revolution or French Revolution, then do not focus only on the positive changes. Also talk about the certain dislocations and the challenges which these have brought it. The movement from rural to urban, machine-based production, migration, decline of feudalism, growth of market economy, and the rise of individualism characterize the new changes brought by Industrial Revolution. The perspective of deregulation, decentralization, economic and political freedom were raised by the bourgeois against the privileges of landed aristocracy. The large scale production also led to the search of new markets, which ultimately gave way to colonization and imperialism. The quality of life of the people improved, but the problems in terms of overcrowding, slums, problem of housing, change in the social relationship, this all started coming out. So this is another component. The third component which we are talking about is free to beginning from 1760s onwards. And here we are talking about. And many times I very journalistically, which we do not do in sociology, I always say that most of the democracies of the world, if they have come to know about the democracy, equality, fraternity, liberty, thanks to the French Revolution. French Revolution reflected a change which were collective in nature. And it also reflects its link with the Enlightenment, the first component which we picked up. Generating the idea that we need to now reconstruct the society. And in this reconstruction of society, ultimately sociology will find its genesis. I just told you that one of the greatest change, qualitative change that it brought, that the society witnessed a shift from monarchy to democracy, which had its impact not only in France, but most of the countries of the world. In the 17th and 18th century, France has emerged as one of the most powerful nations with a long hereditary monarchy, independent fiefdom, production system, authority, national taxation, a standing army. Or when we look at the pre-French society, society was divided into the states. The clergy, the noble, the commoners. And when I look at percentile here, more than 97-98% of the people would be there in terms of the commoners. Very less, negligible percentile would be there of the two states, that is the clergy and the nobleman. Thus, the luxurious life, the extravaganza, all had ruined the economy of the France. But it is also true. If I could quote one of the historian, D.M. Ketelby, that flower of the French Revolution blooms on a dunghill. This statement aptly justifies the deteriorating conditions of France at that time, increasing burdens on the people. But along this, France has also developed as a center of learning, and by the 18th century it also entered the age of reason and rationalism. The philosophers like Montesquieu, spirit of law, decentralization we are talking about, there should not be concentration of power in one hand. Voltaire will emerge out. We will be talking about religious tolerance. We will be raising the concerns on superstitions. We will advocate reason. John Locke, that everyone has certain rights and that rights cannot be galloped. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the social contract theory. You might have gone through the statement, man is born free but everywhere he is in chains. And here he says that man would be governed best when he is governed by the choice of his own government. French Revolution was basically an intellectual revolution. Cart was there, bullock was not there which could carry the cart. The philosophers became the bullock. And these thinkers with their ideas brought a new horizon of thinking. Once again I say, Montesquieu favored separation of power and liberty of individual. Voltaire advocated religious tolerance, freedom of speech, preference of reason, and also raised his concern on superstitions propagated by the church. Locke argued that every individual has a certain rights, like right to life, right to property, and right to personal freedom that cannot be taken by any authority. Whereas Rousseau propagated that people have right to choose their own sovereign. Now look at every statement. Separation of power. There should not be concentration of power in one hand. Superstitions being introspected, criticized. Reason is being propagated. People have the certain rights. That right cannot be galloped by anyone, any authority. People have a right to be governed by their own sovereign. Now these are intellectual thinking. There is a certain sort of a skepticism in the minds of the people that can it become possible or will it become possible? People have not been thinking of that the divine theory which has been there, that king is the march of God on earth, Louis XVI, at the time of whom the French Revolution took place. Now the people have not thought of that this such kind of things, such kind of changes will emerge out. I always say that there occurred a very perfect wedding between thought and the practice. The thought thought, that is the philosophical ideas. The practice, all those soldiers, the French soldiers who has gone to take part in the American War of Independence, they returned back. They returned back with the empirical reality. And thus, offbeat, there was one question, the impact of American War of Independence on a French society. Such kind of questions could come out. So all those soldiers who have come out, they said, yes, it has become possible. The 13 colonies, they have chosen their own fate, their own political discourse. Now in this very perspective, it is true that when looking at the French people they looked Americans as a rugged, but they admired the innocence quality, directness of the Americans. The American Revolution involved a new relationship between an individual in society with that of the government by the people. Thus reflecting that democracy involves a new relationship. The idea of freedom, rights, responsibilities, and the citizenship claimed against traditional authority of the state found its expression in the American War of Independence, which was fought on the natural rights of man. So once again I am saying, the democracy, the directness, the quality of innocence, freedom, rights and responsibilities, citizenship claim against traditional authority of the state had a certain impact on the French society, which had the consequences, important consequences in a French society. The French Revolution occurred on the line of collectivism, brought the new changes, but the question also emerged, how to reorient society. And not only this, dear, we started also looking at new discoveries, inventions, and the European society started having contact with the East. Tentatively, these are the components. And these components have brought the changes. I write few. The changes which are looking at from agrarian to industrial, from feudal to capitalism, from religion to reason, from monarchy to democracy. Why I am giving the 4 changes? So the changes have started coming in all the social, cultural, the behavioral aspect, economic, and political dimension. And once again I repeat the line. In this consequent changes, in this now condition, it was felt that now a new science or study of society has to be developed, established, which could study society in a more scientific manner. The culture tied to land started proving inadequate because the changes have taken place. And thus remember 2 lines of mind here. that sociology emerged as part and a response to modernity. This is the first one. And the second one, it also emerged to address the dislocations brought by modernity. When I say dislocations, we are talking about the challenges. Is man perfect? That kind of debate will start taking place in Enlightenment period. Right from slums to unemployability to the exploitation. These were the challenges the Industrial Revolution will bring about. Da Bonal, Da Mestre. They will be talking about that the old structure, monarchical structure was good. The French Revolution has brought a chaos in a society. Chaotic situation has emerged. At least old order was there, at least order was there in the old system. Such kind of concerns brought by the components will also be raised. And that's why I say, you remember this first line as a part and response to modernity, and also as a to address the dislocations brought by modernity. And if these changes have emerged out, now the idea is surfacing, now we need a new science of society, which will study society holistically. At the center of the study would be the society, not the components. And thus ultimately in 1838, French Revolution, a French scholar, Auguste Comte, would lay down the foundation of sociology on the basis of the hybrid terms, that is socius and logos. And from there, sociology will develop. Though sometimes they not only ask the question directly in terms of modernity, consequent changes and emergence of sociology, it is here. Sometimes they ask for the intellectual impact. I have quoted few scholars right from Da Vinci to René Descartes, even to the Newton, devoid Protestant, that science helped understand the sublime creature of God. To the certain scholars in terms of Montesquieu, Voltaire, Locke, Rousseau. Basically if I say, and if I make one diagram here, then can I say that if you look at the timeline, the same components I am looking in different manner, I am giving you the different manner so that you can reach to the other questions as well. Can I say that thinking is as old as mankind? The worldview may vary, but no society, no man has ever survived without thinking. So thinking seems to be as old as the mankind himself. And it is argued in sociology, in a political science, that the tentative systematic thinking started emerging in the 3rd and 4th century BC. In which Plato, Aristotle, don't use too many names here. Man is the best creation of God, endowed with the certain qualities of gold, silver, iron. Plato. Aristotle. Right, since birth some men are born to command, some to be subjugated. Thus we will find the concept of free men and slaves. So it is argued that somewhere the systematic thinking started emerging from there. Then up to the 12th century, dear, the medieval, and I have written the great chain of being, conventions, traditions, theology, they were the prime concerns. And from here, the tentative changes from 13th century, in which we will be talking about Renaissance. E. Development of science. The same line I am picking up from there. Then F. Enlightenment. And from there, we will be talking about the transition from pre-modern to modernity, the consequent changes and the emergence of sociology. Scientific discoveries, as I all talked about. Now, we will be picking up some other dimensions from there. But before we pick up from there, we will be having the break of 2 minutes and then we will continue from there. That one we are talking about, in brief, the modernity in Europe, consequent changes and emergence of sociology. Then we also need to talk about that when sociology started developing, the certain theoretical stance started emerging out. Of late I am finding about that how they are asking the questions from the certain theoretical stance, which is basically the part of Unit 2, Sociology as a Science, which we will be talking about in a third class. Or tomorrow. But broadly, just look at that how the theoretical stance started emerging out. It's not only the emergence or genesis of sociology in 1838, which not only started looking science or the society scientifically, but on the premise that how the social laws could be found and discovered, established to understand society systematically. And I had said that from here you will find about the emergence of positivism as a scientific method of inquiry in sociology. And that's why I am saying, once again I am repeating the line, that sociology emerged on the premise that either natural scientists are discovering the natural laws to discover the natural phenomena, the sociologists to strive to discover the social laws, to study social phenomena scientifically, akin to that of the natural science, akin to that of the natural laws. So the debate pertaining to the nature of sociology, whether sociology is a science or not, we are not entertaining that one. Yes, the debate will intensify, the debate is still going on, that whether sociology is a science or not. Some consider sociology the science, some basically draw the certain limits, they talk about the delimits, that where sociology cannot be compared to the science. However, sociology is a science or not, I will be picking up tomorrow or today itself. That cannot be answered in simple yes or no. The difference between natural and social science is more of a degree than of a kind. And from there we will begin the Unit 2. But before I come to the Unit 2, some parts I have to talk about because I am finding the certain questions coming from there. In a very brief, let me say that when sociology emerged, evolved, and started institutionalizing. The different theoretical strands also started emerging out. Right from functionalism to the conflict theory, to the interpretism, symbolic interactionism, phenomenology, ethnomethodology, dermatological approach. I was looking at some questions in terms of dermatological approach of Irving Goffman, Harold Garfinkel's ethnomethodology was asked to you. So broadly you divide, in copy you just make a notes, macro and micro. Those who are looking at society as a whole would be the macro theorist. Those who are looking at the individual and the certain concerns, meanings and other differences, they will be the micro theorists. So broadly, whatever the theoretical dimensions, the functionalists, the conflict perspectives, they will be the macro one. Interpretivism, symbolic interactionism, phenomenology, ethnomethodology, dermatological, they all would be the micro theories. But yet a debate also started taking place. That broadly in a generic term, when you say the sociology is a scientific study of society, the debate started taking place in terms of its scope. That what is the scope of sociology? And pertaining to the scope of sociology, there is no one opinion about it. When you look at the sociological fraternity, we do not find one agreement, we do not find one opinion on this one. It was said that anything that happens under the sun is a subject matter of sociology. It is just too wide a scope of sociology. But let me quote V.F. Carlburton, that since sociology is so elastic a science that it is difficult to determine where its boundary begins and ends, where sociology becomes social psychology and where social psychology becomes sociology, or where economic theory becomes sociological doctrine, or where the biological theory gets a sociological context, is impossible to decide. Now we are looking at that elasticity. And in this perspective, when we are looking at the scope broadly, the two perspectives that have started emerging out. That is the formalistic and the synthetic school. So we are talking about, you have gone through, so very brief we will be talking about. There are two schools of thought within which we will try to look at the scope of sociology. At one hand, we are finding the idea that anything that is happening around the sun is a subject matter of sociology. On the other hand, now, the idea is also surfacing that sociology is a limited field of inquiry and deals with those problems which are not addressed by other social sciences. Broadly, sociology is study of human interaction, their interrelations, their conditions and consequences. Sociology, which is a study of society and the happenings within it. And thus, the attempts were initiated to delimit and determine the fields of sociology, and in which, once again, the two schools of thoughts will emerge out. The formal school and the synthetic school. The formal school or the formalistic view finds its genesis in the writings of George. Remember this name, dear, which will be coming in Weber as well. Well, we're dealing with a Weber, this name will come out. And within which we're looking at the socio-historical background of Weber and its emergence of Weberian sociology. Now when you look at George Simmel, who tries to confine its scope to the certain defined aspects of human relationship, and thus he argues that the difference between sociology and other social science is that it deals with the same topic as they do, but from a different angle. That is the angle of different modes of social relationship. To him, sociology is a specific social science which describes, classifies, analyzes and delineates the forms of social relationship. Similarly, the under-scholar would be small. It is the view that sociology does not undertake to study all the activities of society. It means sociology is the study of generic forms of social relationship, behavior and activities. We can't. That sociology is a special branch of knowledge concerned with the ultimate forms of mental or psychic relationship which link men to one another in society. So if we talk about small, but another name which you could remember, that is a Max Weber in a formal school. He asserts that the aim of sociology is to interpret the meaning attributed by the actor behind his action. It means sociology is the study of interpretative understanding of the social action. Thus, the formalistic school focuses on a specific aspect of social relationship. It narrowed down the scope of sociological study. But when you look at the synthetic school, you begin with a milder kind. I quote few. Who viewed sociology in terms of three principal dimensions: social morphology, which is concerned with geographical or territorial basis of the life of people and its relation to the types of social organization. Population, its volume and density. The social physiology, which is divided into the number of branches like sociology of religion, sociology of morals, sociology of law, sociology of division of labor, where every branch deals with a set of social fact. The subject matter of sociology. And the third part is the general sociology, that is to discover the general character of these social facts. So the social morphology, social physiology and general sociology. This question was asked 1 year earlier, few years back. This is the first one. And once we have done this one, then we will find about the another name, that is Hobhouse, L.T. Hobhouse, who argued that sociology is a synthesis of numerous social studies, but the immediate task of sociologists is threefold. That is, as a sociologist, to pursue the studies in the particular part of the social field, to understand the interconnection of social relations, and to arrive at the result by interconnecting the different social sciences, and to interpret social life as a whole. So the second name we are talking about is Hobhouse, and third one is Prithrim. Sorokini. If you remember one name, that you will find. But if you remember, here it is easy to remember George Simmel and Max Weber in formalistic, because when you talk about the formal sociology, you will be beginning with the George Simmel. Like for example, if I say, whom do you call a stranger? A stranger is not the one whom you do not know. A stranger is the one who was not part of the social relationship. So the forms of social relationship where we are looking at from the George Simmel, that was the delimiting perspective of the scope of sociology will be coming out. but are synthesized views which are talking about from Durkheim. And when we talk about Hobhouse, I'll quote Sorokin. He argues that subject matter of sociology includes the study of relationship between different aspects of social phenomena, the relationship between social and non-social, and the general feature of these social phenomena. Karl Mannheim, The Sociology of Knowledge, that could be another one, but it will be too difficult for you to remember all the names. The idea is that you should know that how the debate emerges out in terms of the scope. Use Karl Button, elasticity of the sociological knowledge, and the very generic sentence that anything that happens under the sun is the subject matter of sociology, and from where, how the attempts were initiated to delimit, and from where the formalistic school will come out. And opposite of that would be the synthetic school. And once you have done it, then I'm looking at, I was finding some questions have started coming. Last year the question was there in terms of sociology and political science. You know, I've always been saying that when you look at the relationship of sociology with other social sciences, I wrote 5: psychology, anthropology, history, political science and economics. Do not mug up there. You would be understanding the relation of sociology with economics when you talk about the unit 6, work and economic life. By saying the sentence that economic sociology is not a little economics, that the sociologists practice in a sideways. Similarly, political sociology is not a little political science which we the sociologists practice in a sideways. So the relationship of political science with sociology would better be understood when we are talking about the unit 7, that is basically politics and society. You know, let me say that when you are looking at the relationship, almost every branches of social science, whichever you look at, the two debates will be very common. One pertaining to the nature, whether this is a science or not, which we will just be addressing that one. And what is the relationship of this with other social sciences? In the series of social sciences, no doubt, sociology is a new one. But like every other sciences, it also tried to study science, its subject matter, society, its subject matter, in a scientific manner. And in this journey, it developed a certain theoretical perspective, certain methodological contours, the concepts which are of use to every subject. And when you look at the relationship of sociology with other social sciences, remember 2 sentences of mine there. Number 1, when you attempt the questions on relationship, do focus on convergence and divergence, similarities and differences. And the second sentence which you need to remember, the difference between the social sciences is not what they study. The difference between the social sciences is how they study, what perspective they bring to study the phenomena. Commonality of phenomena could be found. Right from the economics, to the political science, to the education, to anthropology, to the psychology. The human phenomena, human interaction, the happenings in and around man, may be the common kind of subject matter. So what they study is not important. How they study is a more important one. And in this very perspective, the relationship between the social sciences, sociology with the social sciences, that has to be talked about. The sociology which developed, which emerged, developed, got institutionalized with the passage of time. It developed its own perspective, methods and theoretical dimensions, which provided sociology a definite entity and a specificity in terms of this. Let me give you a very brief account on that one. We as a sociologist share the interest of psychologists in individual. But rather than looking individual as an entity, totality, we basically view individual in collectivity, configuration of collectivity. Psychological explanation is not wrong in sociology. It is inadequate. At the very nascent phase of sociology, that sociology has nothing to do with the psychological one. And sociological explanation cannot be amenable to the psychological explanation, was laid down by Emile Durkheim. More precisely when he picks up the social fact as a subject matter of sociology. Social fact as those collective ways of thinking, feeling and doing, which though comes through individual, but are external to him and are endowed with a coercive power. The way he focused on a supra-individual. There he talks about it how sociology, on the basis of this supra-individual dimension, transcendental reality of society, he makes sociology differ from that of psychology. However, when we look at the Weber, Max Weber, the German scholar, at another founding fathers of sociology, the interpretative understanding of social action is the subject matter of sociology. We'll be talking about the detail. How he basically prefers that common sense psychology has to be used. The meanings which the people derive, being a part of the culture, the common sense psychology has to be used. Though the major difference in terms of individual versus collectivity, mental system versus social system, that will always be there. And similarly, we, the sociologists, share the interest of anthropologists in culture. But we basically view culture as a part of the society. And thus, whenever the relationship comes out, I said 2, 1. The difference and similarities. That is convergence and divergence. And then what they study is not important. Rather, how they study is important. Right? The perspective they bring. Once you have done this one, then you also bring the third one in terms of foci of interest. The theoretical, methodological perspective. You try to look this one. I said that when you're looking at that how sociologists share the interest of psychology in individual, but we look individual in collectivity. Similarly, we share the interest of anthropologists in culture, but we look culture as a part of the society. You also need to talk about etymologically. In terms of the study, what they study. Anthropology has come from the two Greek words, anthropos and logos. Anthropos, man, logos, study. It's a study of man in totality. When I say study of man in totality, both the sociological and biological perspective, from the both sociological and biological perspective. There are four major branches of anthropology. The biological or physical anthropology, archaeological anthropology, that is sometimes prehistoric, linguistic anthropology, and sociocultural anthropology. One of the branch of anthropology which comes very close to reflecting a familial resemblance with sociology is the sociocultural anthropology. I am just giving a brief because that is not the part. I write down few points and I'll try to supply within a few days. So Kroeber, A.L. Kroeber, that sociology and social anthropology are the twin sisters. And when we look at M.N. Srinivas, that sociology and social anthropology are one and same. There is a familial resemblance. But despite this, in terms of the foci of interest, theoretical and methodological perspective, the different branches of social sciences cannot be clubbed with one another. Similar is with the history there. History is basically the study of past, reconstruction of past. Sociology is empirical in nature. If history is descriptive, sociology is analytical. But you need to remember that in the emergence of sociology, the anticipation, the historical happenings have played an important role. No branch of social science, no branch of science even, is free of historical knowledge. History provides the store of information. It is the womb of information. So if you look at right from the early sociologists, from Kant to Spencer to Durkheim to Marx, you will find about even Weber, you will find about the use of historical dimension. You find the certain sentences like the questions like meaningless and rootless, history without sociology, sociology without history. Such kind of questions are coming out there. So that way this relationship has to be talked about. And whether I like it or not, once again I am saying, whether we talk about the economic, work and economic and politics and society, we'll be talking about the relations between economics and political science. We'll be talking about the relations between political science and sociology, economics and sociology. Remember these three lines of mine. And substantiate your view with the certain scholars. One or two scholars. I am saying to substantiate your view, not to frame your answer. You just substantiate your view. And in this very perspective, the things will be coming. But all along this journey, when sociology has emerged, developed, institutionalized, raise the debate on its nature, raise the debate on its scope. And I also talk about the relationship with other social sciences. One acquisition has always been there and still it is going on. That sociology is basically the study of obvious. And thus, one of the important perspectives that comes out to be talked about in this one is basically the common sense and sociology. In and around man, people have always assumed about the way the world is and about the world in which they live. So when they have the assumptions about the way the world is, how the world is, about the world in which they live, it reflects the perspective of the common sense in which the people think and attribute that what they know is true. And thus, can I say that common sense are the ideas which people claim that they know and they consider it to be true. They see it as if it is true. And in this context, the common sense has a very long history. Right since the emergence of man in groups or in society, the people have wondered about the world in which they have lived. They have tried to develop their own worldviews. They try to explain the different ways and happenings in and around them. They not only developed their own worldviews, they also developed the idea of power higher than man, resulting into the idea of supernatural. And they looked at it in such a manner, they looked in such a way that it is true, and they considered it to be true. Even the different behavioral patterns were believed to be true. For example, the food bindings in ancient China, food bindings of females in ancient China, it was supported by the belief that men are highly aroused by seeing a small feet, even though men have never saw naked foot. An anthropologist, Fred Blake, who argues that if seen by the man, it might have been repulsive because of the fact that the feet was U-shaped and often decayed and covered with dead skin. Now look at, when you're talking about the behavioral pattern which was held in terms of being true, then foot binding in ancient history in China considered to be the matter of arousal. Now when the certain sociological works begins, the certain anthropological works begins, it was found that when the binding would be overdone, would be taken out, a scalp would be there, dead skin would be there, U-shaped kind of feet would be there. So rather than arousal, it will be a matter of repulsion. Why am I saying so? I am saying so because of the fact that any held belief or anything that we consider to be true, whether they are true or not, require scientific investigation, require scientific research. And in this very perspective, the moment you say that any idea which has been considered to be true, thought to be true, and it has been viewed, held in such a manner that it seems to be true, whether they are true or not, requires scientific research, scientific investigation. And here comes the sociology. Time and again I have said, and I have been saying once again, that what separates common sense from sociology is the scientific nature of sociology. And I just made the sentence that when you are looking at the emergence of sociology as a part and response to modernity, reason has emerged out. The premise that the social laws akin to the natural laws are to be found and discovered, and within which the positivism as a scientific method of inquiry will emerge out. So once again I am saying what separates common sense from sociology is the scientific nature of sociology. The scientific nature of sociology generates the knowledge which cannot simply be considered as a statement of obvious. It is more than a common sense. Sociological knowledge will help us, sociological investigation will help us understand the everyday life, to see the everyday life in a different perspective. The actions, the ideas of the people would not be taken for granted. And thus, behind the facts, debunking that has to be talked about. If I could talk about Peter Buzzer, we need to go for the debunking. We need to develop the sociological imagination, C.W. Mills. So sociology is not taken for granted. It is not the study of obvious. Peter Berger, I'm quoting, Peter Berger highlights on the process of debunking, that is looking behind the facts of everyday life. It is an unmasking tendency in sociology, requiring not only the critical mind but also the critical distance. It requires to relinquish of taking things for granted. This debunking will make sociologists move away from the common sense. The critical distance will make him look the things in a more critical, more rational, more scientific manner. And when you're looking at anything from the distance, through the critical thinking, it will also be not making us move away from taken for granted reality. This sociological imagination will provide a very solid base to the understanding of the social phenomena what the sociologist will be concerned of. The positivist, once again I am saying, the positivist initiated other new dimensions in the study of the common sense. Though with the rise of the non-positivist, we will be finding about it how the certain common sense, understanding of the common sense will become the more important one. And thus today itself, I said that when we are talking about the common sense of sociology, you basically need to make a difference. That whether any idea which is considered to be true or held to be true, whether this is true or not requires scientific analysis, the sociological research. So if I make a diagram and if I ask you to write loud in this manner, pick up few examples. So right, this question was asked recently. Now let me give few. People change as they grow old, losing many interests as they focus on their health. It's a common sense. What the sociological finding says? It is true that aging changes our personality, but very little. By and large, the elderly people keep their distinctive interest intact. Let me pick up the another one. Differences in the behavior of male and female reflect human nature. This is a common sense, which is considered to be true. The sociological research indicates that very less percentile meet the common stereotype, and many people actually what we call human nature is constituted by society, and it depends on how society define masculine and feminine characteristics. How does the society is defining? So the sociological research is something different, which is not meeting the common stereotype. I don't know, let me talk about the new kind of debate which is coming out in terms of welfareist policies, or we sometimes in a frustration we talk about this robbery culture or the freebies which we are talking about. There has always been a very common sense, it has developed the common sense, that most people on welfare schemes are lazy, looking for a handout. They could work if they want to work. This is a common sense feeling which we have developed, which have made it very obvious, and we look at it in such a manner that it seems true. We justify that one. However, you need to remember one fact, that most of the people who are on the welfare schemes are children, old, differently abled, marginalized, and mothers with a very limited skill to whom nobody wants to work. The sociological research indicates that very less percentile meet the common stereotype, and most of the people who are in the welfare schemes, they actually look for the jobs. Now this is the sociological finding. Yet another common sense is, when faced with natural calamities such as floods, earthquakes, people panic and social organization disintegrates. Sorry. It's raining outside. What the sociological finding is? Following such disasters, people develop greater cohesion, cooperation, and social organization to deal with whenever such calamities occur. And if I pick up at another one, the emergence that the earnings of women in the last few decades has caught up with that of the men. No doubt. Over the decades, the income gap between men and women has narrowed down, but slightly. The researchers indicate that an average full-time working woman earns only 60 to 65% of what an average full-time working man earns. That's what I'm saying. You pick up the common sense. And in exam you write down. And there you talk about true or false. Give your writing. So obvious. Idea viewed in terms of true, considered to be true, give certain logic. Give the Peter Berger debunking. Talk about the sociological imagination of C.W. Mills. Talk about it, how with the rise of positivism in early nascent phase of sociology, the scientific nature of sociology began, which tried to separate it from the common sense. And then you give that anything which is held to be true, considered to be true, whether they are true or not, requires scientific research, scientific investigation, and where the sociological findings comes out. So 4 or 5 which I have given, the people change as they grow old, difference in the behavior of male and female reflect human nature. Most people on welfare schemes are lazy. When faced with natural calamities such as floods, earthquakes, people panic and social organization disintegrates. The earnings of women in the last few decades has caught up with that of the men. And that way, the common sense and sociological findings will come out. Present this like this in your writing. Not necessarily all. Pick up 2 or 3, just give you this one. Make the examiner know that you understand the subject and you understand the need disposition of the question. That way, right from the modernity, let me summarize, right from the modernity, the transition that Western Europe has witnessed from pre-modern to modern, the certain changes were brought by the components of modernity, right from Enlightenment to the contact with the East. Industrial Revolution, French Revolution, discoveries, inventions, scientific discoveries, voyages, they all have brought the newer kind of changes. And in this change perspective, we find about that how the previous explanations are proving inadequate. Now we need to search for the new explanations. And in this search for the new explanations, sociology will emerge as a discipline. So, modernity in Europe, consequent changes and emergence of sociology. And once you talk about the emergence of sociology, then a scope in terms of formalistic and synthetic. I told you remember only two. In a formalistic, you remember George Simmel and Weber. Synthetic, you remember only two. That is Durkheim and Sorokin. And then you come to the relationship. And I have written you the 3 lines in terms of looking at the relationship. In the study schedule, that relationship was not there, but I had given you. And I promise that within few days I will supply you something in handwritten, or some points in terms of the relationship, which will upload it to you. But let me once again, before I take 1 minute, 2 minutes break, I'll not let you know that why this break after 50-55 minutes, I'll not let you know. It is you to guess, and I think when we are looking very rationally, and you'll come to know that why I'm taking that break. I'm the only 1 or 2 teachers left in this field who take this break, and I'll be taking this break. Don't worry, you are in a safe hand. Neither I will be cause of rejection, nor sociology will be cause of rejection. That promise which I am giving to you. I have always given that promise. And once again I am saying that if you need something, in advance let me know, so that it could be written. I write it in the hands whenever I'll get a time, and I'll few points, synopsis kind of one, that will be given to you, and sometimes you can talk to me when I'm free. I'm there for you. Together we'll have to get the result. I just said that once the sociology emerged, developed and institutionalized, the debate was not only on the what sociology should study, what the scope is there, what the relationship of the social sciences are there. The debate also intensified on the nature of sociology, whether sociology is a science or not. And thus from here, the unit 2 will begin. Let me take the syllabus. One minute, better. There are 5 subunits. Science, scientific methods, and critic. Now when you look at the second one, this is Usually talking tomorrow, the second class. Though we will be talking about their names. This is the syllabus in the Unit 2, dear. Before we re-begin, let me make one sentence to you. You do not try to look them one by one. You try to look them in a synthesized manner. All these 5 in your syllabus will be involving the debate in terms of positivism and non-positivism. That's why I said that debate in sociology is not here. Though here we will be talking about certain dimension. But as a matter of fact, the debate in sociology is not there, whether sociology is a science or not. Even the non-positivist like Weber will be saying that sociology is a science. Whether the methods of natural science be applied in the study of society or not, this should be the major concern of debate, in which we need to talk about positivism and non-positivism. And here I said one line today, that when we talk about a science, look at the general understanding. When we say science, we understand science in terms of physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics. No, science has nothing to do with any subject. Science is basically a procedure or a method. And whether any science or any discipline is a science or not, that cannot simply be answered in yes or no, or in simple yes or no. The way we have made the difference between natural versus social science, the difference between natural versus social science is more of a degree than of a kind. These 3 lines you remember of mine. And from here to there, non-positivist, you remember only 2 things. That is basically we are talking about positivism and non-positivism. Even in here, you will be raising the same debate. Alright? The critic is there. I have always said that when you prepare Unit 2 with that of the Unit 4. Do not go here and there. Do not mug up most of the scholars here and there. Some of the best quotes, 1 or 2 quotes I will give you today. I will write it down there. But if you look at all the 5 scholars, Durkheim is a positivist. Marx as a dialectical method will become a critic to positivism. Weber is a non-positivist. G.H. Mead with the symbolic intrinsicism, when we will witness the impact of Einstein's relativity, he will be moving away from positivism, and the non-positivist in terms of symbolic intrinsicism will begin. So Durkheim, Marx, Weber, G.H. Mead, and 1 or 2 scholars to substantiate your view. So whenever you are reading, when you are talking about, once you have read the thinkers, Unit 4, do read it, Unit 2. Look at there. Make a synopsis, make a certain kind of notes. Jot down few points. And that way the debate will be coming on. We'll begin this one. I'm taking 2 minutes off and then we'll begin that one. Let me begin this unit by positing the two questions. Your unit 2, is a sociology as a science. So your major focus should be there in terms of on what ground sociology seems to be science and how the sociological works have tried to look sociology as a science. Yet another sentence, is sociology a science? So here, scientific methods and critique will come out. And the two lines once again, this is the third time I am repeating, that if any discipline is a science or not, any subject is a science or not, that cannot be answered in simple yes or no. And the way the difference has been made between natural and social science, the difference is more of a degree than of a kind. Right since the inception of sociology, in 1838, till date when you are looking at the contemporary sociologists, every sociologist tried to understand society, happenings in and around human behavior in a scientific manner. And when you look sociology as a discipline, the first unit, discipline itself connotes an organized body of methods or procedures. In the sense, when you look at the meaning of science, it reflects the perspective of methods. That is an attempt to obtain knowledge on the basis of systematic inquiry. In this context, science is basically related to logical systematic methods by which knowledge of nature is obtained and accumulated. It is argued that any discipline can be equated with science if it is empirical, has theoretical perspectives, logicality, cumulative knowledge, without being biased. And when you say without being biased, then we are talking about the perspective of neutrality. So I repeat few lines. The empirical, theoretical perspective, logicality, cumulative knowledge, and neutrality. If such kind of things are there with any discipline, it will be equated with the science. If I quote W.F. Ogburn, he argued that sociology is a science which could be evaluated on the basis of reliability of knowledge, organization of knowledge, and methodology. In this sense, sociology tries to obtain knowledge on the basis of empiricality, causality, experimentation, reliable sources. It organizes the knowledge and initiates a systematic inquiry, whatever the phenomena it has picked up to study. The foundation of sociology, which was laid down by the French scholar Auguste Comte, was on this premise that, like natural science, where the focus is on the discovery of the natural laws, the social laws akin to that of the natural laws could be discovered and established, which will make sociology as a science. And thus, once again I am saying, right since the inception of sociology, sociology was viewed as a science, within which, if you look at the works of Auguste Comte, Herbert Spencer, Emile Durkheim, all have basically talked about the scientific nature of sociology, in which the positivism as a scientific method of inquiry will become the more important one. Being based on observation, experimentation, testification, causality. When you talk about Auguste Comte, who initiated the positivistic movement in sociology, though we need to remember that positivism emerged in the certain time period of historical development in a social thinking. But in sociology, when you're looking at Auguste Comte, he focuses on this observation, experimentation and testification. When Herbert Spencer, I always say the sociology which was baptized by Auguste Comte was freed with the theoretical dimension by Spencer, who basically focused on the biological evolutionism. However, Emile Durkheim, on the basis of methodology, established sociology as a science with a positivistic orientation. And I said establish sociology as a science with a positivistic orientation. I quote one line of Durkheim, that sociology is a science on the basis of its own merit. And thus, objectivity, free from the individual psychological predisposition, was emphasized by Emile Durkheim. This is not only merely the debate in terms of when talking about sociology as a science. There is also a possibility emerging out that there could be a value-free sociology. The psychological individual predispositions are to be discarded. So the positivist would basically be focusing on facts, and sociology, the science, would basically be halved by them. However, when we look at, on the other hand, that human nature, human society is different from that of the nature. Lack of control experiment, accuracy, true objectivity, perspective of value emergence, the researcher's bias. These were the certain kind of perspective which was picked up. Lack of laboratory. And thus it was argued that sociology is not a science. But as sociology developed, the different non-positivist dimensions that also started emerging out. And one of the most important perspective that will emerge out will be basically by the German scholar Max Weber. Like Durkheim, he also addresses the methodological concerns in sociology. And sometimes we find about the questions, a good number of questions, not only comparatively in terms of Durkheim and Weber, but also we find about the value-free sociology, value neutrality, objectivity, and some questions have been there to answer that one from the perspective of Weber. Weber has been a neo-idealist. Weber has been a part of German historicism. The debate which has emerged in Germany pertained to the methods of natural and social science. Wilhelm Dilthey, Wilhelm Windelband, Henrik Rickert, they all will be there. I'll be talking about them when I'll talk about Weber. Though in the German historicism, the debate has emerged out in terms of nomothetic and ideographic methods. Nomothetic, that is search of universalizing laws, and ideographic is individualizing laws. The idea surfaces that matter and man cannot be equated. Matter does not have a conscience, matter does not have meaning. Humans have. And Weber, being a part and parcel of this German historicism, will initiate a historical and ideographic approach in sociology. And from there, the way the facts were highlighted by the positivists and values were discarded, a debate will intensify in terms of the facts and value dichotomy. I quote two lines of Weber. that sociology to become science does not need to be positivistic in orientation. This is the first line which I am saying. And the second line Weber says that even if sociology is not positivistic in orientation, objectivity would not prelude us. I agree that the concerns of objectivity which we are addressing in natural science and social science may differ in degree, but not in a kind. But even if sociology is not positivistic, objectivity will not prelude us. And thus, he initiates an interpretative movement in sociological analysis to interpret the meaning attributed by the actor behind his action. And thus the first hand method, explanatory first hand, to understanding, that will be highlighted. And from here, non-positivist stand will emerge out. When I go deep into this one, to make you understand, even Marx comes out, and I quote one line of Marx, that what is the purpose of methods? Is the purpose of method is to repeat the things which is already known? Now he says that the purpose of method is negative. I repeat, the purpose of method is negative. It is to eradicate the self-delusion, the self-doubt. And thus, with his focus on the dialectical method, he becomes a critic of positivism. Coming back to Weber, that when he said the interpretative understanding in sociology, then he also raises the concerns on relation of science to value. That whenever any science, either we are talking about the social science, history or science, whenever any investigator picks up any phenomena to study, he does it from a certain point of reference. And thus he denies that there could be true objective study of the social phenomena. Now look at the debate in terms of value-free sociology. Here in a Weber, whenever the investigator picks up any phenomena to study, he does it from a certain point of reference. Is basically the concept of value relevance. Though Weber also argues that if sociology is value relevant, it needs to be value neutral. Why? Because science is all about facts, not of values. Thus, in the Weberian sociology, not only the non-positivist perspective emerges out, but the concept of value relevant, value neutrality, ideographic approach opposite to the nomothetic, that begins it, individualizing laws. Similarly, Weberian work, Weberian sociology would be a piece of motivation, reference for the new theoretical methodological developments in sociology. If we are talking about the symbolic interactionist, G.H. Mead, Herbert Blumer, or if we are talking about the phenomenologist, Alfred Suge, Edmund Husserl, if we are talking about the ethnomethodology, Garfinkel, if we are talking about dermatological approach by the Goffman, they will also be initiating the non-positivist stand in sociology. The way sociology, which was perceived to be a science, in which positivism has played an important role, now the idea has started emerging out. The debate is now intensifying in sociology. That social science, primarily sociology, cannot be compared to that of the natural science. And why it cannot be compared? It cannot be compared because the subject matter which you are looking at in sociology, the man, the individual, the human beings, they have a conscious life which the matters do not have. So man cannot be equated with the matter. Though yet another debate also entangled with it. There is a lack of the physical laboratory. There is always a problem of biasness, problem of value. There is a problem of direct experimentation in sociology. Difficult to establish homogenization between cause and effect phenomena. Problem of objectivity. It was said that sociology is not a science. Though let me say that it is true, not denying the fact that the basic unit of analysis in sociology are human beings whose behaviors are not mechanical. But it does not mean that sociological analysis is not logical and systematic. The focus on empiricism, causality, systematic analysis, generalization manifest the pathways for the science, sociology to be a science. Moreover, sociological analysis focuses on certain assumptions that shows regularity. Hence a pattern, and the method emphasizes on observation and verification. Thus, its nature is scientific, but distinct from that of the natural science. This is the first part we will be talking about. But this is the one which throughout this entire debate, this is the one which will always be going on. So now, let me give you certain perspectives in terms of here I said this is simple, in simple line which I said. That is the scientific method of inquiry. I'll quote few so that you can remember when we will be watching it. It is a way of understanding based on science. Positivism which emerged in the different timeline of human history. It basically connoted the optimism that it would be possible to create sociology as a science. It will be possible to study society based on the same principle and parameters of the natural science. Now this optimism has emerged out. That as the natural scientists are discovering the natural laws to understand the natural phenomena, so the socialists would be able to discover and establish the social laws akin to the natural laws to understand the social phenomena. That optimism has been raised. And it was obvious that when the development of science has taken place, the natural science has developed. Not only the sociologists, even the historians are debating that can these scientific methods be applied in their own investigation, in their own study of phenomena. Now, where in sociology, this positivism which has been emerging out, it has raised that optimism. That now it is possible to study the society scientifically on the basis of the same principle of the natural science. Auguste Comte the founder of sociology, initiated positivist movement in sociology and maintained the application of the methods of natural science would produce the positive science of society. The behavior of man, like the behavior of matter, can be quantified by measures and methods of objective measurement. And thus, the positivists emphasize on the behaviors that can be directly observed, and the factors like feeling, emotions, intentions, which cannot be directly observed, are insignificant, unimportant. This march towards the positivist strand provided an immense cognitive prestige to the discipline of sociology. Prior to this, the debate is going on that sociology does not have its own specific subject matter, sociology does not have its own methodology, human bias is there, direct observation is not possible. Now this is gone. Positivism has brought this optimism, has brought this cognitive prestige to the practitioners of sociology. The scientific methodological principle of empirical observation, deductive reasoning, and formulation of laws based on universal generalization could now become possible in sociology, in the study of the social phenomena. Sociology, which is studying the society, through this, the empirical observations, deductive reasoning, laws could be formulated. And on the basis of these laws, universal generalization would become possible. It has always been accused that sociology would not be able to generalize. But this universal generalization will become possible. And thus, the positivists believe that it is possible to apply the methods of natural science in the study of society. It is possible to apply the methods of natural science in the study of society that basically gave way to the positivism. But once we march toward the positivism, it also reflects a march from conjecture to reality. And thus, the certain purposes started coming out in sociology. It provided a purpose in a sociological method. Let me quote few. It separated sociology as an empirical science from humanities and philosophy. More precisely, when you are using this line, that how sociology is different from philosophy and psychology, Durkheim's positivist orientation will emerge out. Durkheim's methodology will be coming out. It means now, the perception of sociology as a science is broadly outlining the certain purpose. And thus I said that it separates sociology as an empirical science from humanities and philosophy. It provided a professional identity to the sociologists, the practitioners of sociology. It overcame the limiting identities emanating from caste, class, race, ethnicity, and nationality. That universal generalization which we are talking about. Now it is going beyond these limited dimensions. It focused on more rational, objective analysis based on universal manner. The knowledge acquired in a scientific manner would help reconstruct the society and create a better world. The applied aspect is also emerging out. And thus, certain salient features of positivism started emerging out. Now, what are the features if we are talking about? Now, belief in the unity of methods. Number 2, sociology not different from natural science. Number 3, it celebrated objectivity and value neutrality. It also reflected another characteristics, that sociology is not a common sense. Rather, it is a body of formal and organized method. Sociology can strive for observation and generalization. So 5th, observation and generalization. These all are the features of So many questions have come here from positivism. Try to find out features of positivism. Now the same line I am saying, repeating, that the possibility the social world could be studied in the same manner as the natural world. Now this possibility is not only being searched, but being established. Social laws could be formulated akin to that of the natural laws. And once these social laws would be discovered, established, it will provide a scientific status, scientific meaning, scientific character to the study of social behavior. And in this very perspective, objectivity, facts, they were basically being highlighted. Let's go a bit back. That when I'm looking at the emergence of positivism, that orientation, when I say that it emerged in a certain juncture of human history, right from Enlightenment, when the science has developed, reason became the prime concern. That started institutionalizing. And from there, the focus on this reason, the development of natural science, is now making the social scientists, the historians, even the historians, to mold their study toward that of the possibility akin to that of the natural science. The idea is surfacing that scientific study of society would not become possible without adopting the methods of natural science. Those who are now focusing on the adoption of the methods of natural science would be the positivists. Kant, Spencer, Durkheim. Durkheim in the rules of sociological method would lay down the perspective of causality, with his focus on the subject matter, that is the social fact. The individual psychological predisposition would be discarded in other kinds of perspective. Objective study of society would basically be emphasized. And thus, we are finding about it how The scientific study of society laid down by positivism, initiated by positivism, is providing a new kind of identity to the sociology discipline. And right since the emergence, separating sociology from humanities and philosophy, those who are accusing that it is not possible to study objectively, now these possibilities are being raised. That's why it says that it is basically bringing about certain kind of optimism and providing this cognitive prestige to the practitioners of that one. However, I just quoted, when we are looking at the critic, then talk about Marx, dialectical, Weber, interpretive sociology. They all will be the non-positivist methods as well here. Symbolic interactionism. Passing reference, one or two, mid. Then talk about phenomenology, Suge and Husserl, Goffman, dermatological, and also talk about the ethnomethodology by. Just mention it. Your major focus should be in terms of critique here and here. Though this question has been asked how the neo-idealist and symbolic interactionists have criticized positivism. This question has been asked. So the neo-idealist, the Weber, and in a symbolic interactionism, the Mead would be coming out. And in this very perspective, let me give you the certain lines. That how the sociologists need to interpret the meaning provided by the actor behind his action, in which first-hand method becomes important. Explanatory first-hand here, not direct observational first-hand. Reflexivity, certain empathetic perspective will be emerging out, highlighted by Weber. Now when you're looking at the symbolic interactionist, it viewed society as a product of interaction. An analyzed actor having a self, active self, within which the work of G.S. Mead became significant. Even the phenomenologists argue that it is impossible to measure objectively any aspect of human behavior. Humans make sense by categorizing, and the process of categorization is subjective. Objective-subjective debate is emerging out. The meaning attributed to the actor, the subjective dimension is emerging out. The actor who is active, having the active self. When I'll begin Mead, I'll draw a diagram so that you will understand positivism versus symbolic interactionism. And now when we're looking at the life essence drama, it means all these are basically not only the critic, but they are also initiating from here the non-positivist methods. Now look at the debate, the two stands. It is possible to study social phenomena, society, from the methods of natural science. This is the one stand in which positivism is emerging out. That social science and subject matter is different from that of the natural science. Hence, social science requires different methods. Its nature is not nomothetic, that search of universal laws. These non-positivists are emerging out, arguing that what is applicable in the domain of nature is not necessarily applicable in domain of society. Unlike nature, society consists of self-reflective agents, self-reflective actors who think, argue, and through their actions transform the social order. Not only this, dear, but there also emerged at another perspective that is called, you can pick up, question is there. I don't know whether you have come through Thomas Kuhn paradigms or Karl Popper falsification in terms of science. That falsification will also be used as a critique of Marx. So we don't know from where this post-positivism could be traced back. But these are the certain works from where the post-positivism comes out. And the post-positivism, also called post-empiricism, it is a meta-theoretical perspective. Not only emerged as a critique of positivism, but also amended it by arguing that the theories, hypothesis, and value of the investigator can influence what is observed. Value free? Is sociology value free? Can there be value free sociology? Can you quote this line? Once again I am saying. The theories, hypothesis, and value of the investigator can influence what is observed. Implying that like positivists, though they pursue objectivity but recognizes the possible effects of biasness. They believe that human knowledge is bound not on a priori means fixed, a priori assessment from an objective individual, but rather upon human conjectures. The post-positivists are believing that reality exists, but reality can be known only imperfectly. They argue that bias is undesired but inevitable. Thus, the sociologist must work to detect and try to correct it. I said about falsification of this. So this question was there in post-positivism. Now this debate in not only between positivism, non-positivism or critic, but the debate is also emerging in terms of the objectivity, subjectivity, facts and value dichotomy. That debate is also emerging out. The way the positivists have tried to separate the knower from the known, subjectivity from the objectivity, values from the facts, that is now being debated. In which the work of Alvin Goldner, G-O-U-L-D-N-E-R, Goldner, seems to be the more important one. He brings about an alternative to positivism. I quote, he warns us of methodological dualism. I repeat the word. What is the warning? The warning is of methodological dualism brought by positivism. That is, separating knower from the known, subject from the object, facts from value. And thus, he accuses positivists of, mind the word better, accuses positivists of cold objectivity, leading to alienation of sociologists from their own self. Cold objectivity, alienation of sociologists from their own self. Now I love this statement of Anthony Giddens when he says that nature and human society are two different realms of inquiry. Nature is not a human product, but society is. Thus there is a limit to the natural science methodology in sociology. All those in sociology who are waiting for the Newton to arrive are not only waiting on the wrong station, or not waiting for the train that would not arrive, but they are also at a wrong station. Let me once again repeat the Anthony Giddens. He argues that nature and human society are two different realms of inquiry. Nature is not a human product, but society is. Therefore, there is a limitation to the natural science methodology in sociology. In sociology, those or who are waiting for Newton are not only waiting for the train that will not arrive, but they are also waiting at a wrong station. Now, in this very perspective, you just raise the facts, value and objectivity. This is the critic, this is the non-positivist dimension. Same debate, I said about that all the 5 units are there in terms of positivism and non-positivist perspective. We can also look in terms of macro and a micro perspective, which I said at the very beginning of the class today. The debate which is coming out in terms of facts and values, that is now intensifying, that is now being raised by the positivist and the non-positivist. And that debate is also emerging related to sociology as a science. Question of objectivity, value-free sociology, such kind of things which are being harped, which are being emphasized in sociology by the positivist. Slowly and gradually, as the sociology is institutionalizing, as the sociology is establishing, these debates are also emerging out. That is there any place of subjectivity in sociology? Is there any relation of science to value? Is there perspective of value relevance? So this facts and value, objectivity, subjectivity, facts and value debate, that is intensifying in sociology. In the classical sociology, one of the major concern has been there right from the beginning, right from the inception. Believing this idea that science is objective and value free. If the natural science is objective and value free, and as the natural scientists are discovering the natural laws, to study the natural phenomena, sociologists must strive to discover the social laws, to study the social phenomena akin to that of the natural laws, in which objectivity and value free would be emphasized. And therefore, objective investigation emerged as a prerequisite. And everyone started emphasizing on the value-free sociology. But the questions which I said, can sociology be value-free? So not only the questions in terms of the facts and value dichotomy, value-free sociology, but the questions on value neutrality, the problem of objectivities are also being raised. And in this very perspective, the positivists who are saying that the meanings, the values, sociologists should not permit, because that will basically be undermining the objective nature of scientific study of society, is now being debated. Now, for example, if I pick up Robert Billstead, he said that objectivity means that conclusion arrived at as a result of inquiry, where investigators are independent of race, color, creed, occupation, nationality, moral preferences, and even political predisposition. It means if the researcher is truly objective, is free from the subjective elements, objectivity is it is as it is, without being biased. And that was the search of objectivity, right from the emergence of sociology, right from the emergence of positivism, is basically being talked about. Discarding of subjectivity, discarding of the values, is now being emphasized, that the debate which you have raised. Either we're looking at in terms of Kant, Spencer, Durkheim. But let me once again remind you, in this very debate, one of the major turning point would be the Weberian sociology, Weberian methodology in sociology. And two, which I have, once again I am repeating. Relation of science to value, within which the value relevance will come out. There cannot be possibility of value-free sociology, and there cannot be possibility of complete objective reality, objective study of the social phenomena. Though he is saying that if sociology is a value relevant, he is recognizing that sociology is a value relevant. But it needs to be value neutral. The two perspectives I am picking up in Weber as well, once again. Because these two perspectives are to be known by you. The problem of relation of science to value and the problem of value neutrality will make Weber to bring ideal type as a method in the fore of sociological analysis. Your ideal type understanding should begin from there. So there is a problem of relevance, there is a problem of relation of science to value and value neutrality. The meaning what the actor is attributing to his action, that needs to be interpreted first, and as a method would be coming out in a Weberian methodology. And thus, once again, Weber is basically saying that true objective study of society cannot be possible. So all those early sociologists, the positivists, who are imagining, who are emphasizing that sociology should be value free and should be more concerned with what is rather than what ought to be. Now this is being debated. And the concerns on subjectivity, the values are also emerging out. Facts and value dichotomy is emerging out. Values have no place, only facts are to be studied. Subjectivity is to be discarded, because subjectivity will basically undermine the sociological analysis. Such kind of things are being propagated, are being emphasized to make sociology a science. I had quoted Weber, ideographic approach, individualizing laws. And even if sociology is not positivistic, objectivity would not prelude us. And sociology to become science does not need to be positivistic. I just quoted the post-positivism, symbolic criticism, phenomenologist, dermatological one, ethnomethodological one. The certain perspective of subjectivity, the value, that will basically be coming into their writings. So overall, if the positivists become more concerned of facts, thereby urging to discard values, then the non-positivist basically realize the importance of value, realize that it is there in a sociology. It is not completely possible to go away from the values. And thus, unlike the positivists, who are basically saying that fact is only the valid property of science, the fact is the valued property to be adopted in sociology. Now the value is also creeping in, value is also being incorporated, and that way the facts and value dichotomy is coming out. The idealist, the subjectivist, and symbolic interactionist, all these are basically talking about the human values. It is now being said, and we are accepting that one, that most of the works in sociology today are based in part of the value judgment. Neither the functionists nor the Marxists, they have been free of their values. Even the post-positivists are now arguing that neither it is possible nor desirable to try to remove value from sociology. Even C.W. means sociological imagination, which he talked about. He says that sociologists should take a sides and they should try to use their work to fight injustice, so to improve society. Nigel Harris argues that sociology can never be free from ideology. I don't know whether you have heard of Elvin Goldner's anti-Minotaur. Minotaur is basically the half bull, half man. That to understand Minotaur, it is difficult to separate bull from the man. So in sociology, it will be difficult to free facts from the values. He is talking about the concept of domain assumptions. And I quote that Elvin Goldner argued that when sociologists decide what topic to study, to make domain assumption, he makes domain assumption, that is basic assumptions what sociologists may make about the nature of social life or human behavior. Every sociologist is, in practice, tends to commit to practice set of domain assumptions. Thus, in his anti-Minotaur, the myth of value-free sociology, he argued that just as the bull and man in mythical Minotaur cannot be separated, so facts and values cannot be separated in sociological research. Though let me conclude with this line, that if you decrease the subjectivity, objectivity will increase. True, every sociologist is also a part of culture, or every sociologist is a part of the certain groups, certain culture. They have their own meaning, which we cannot resist. But there is a world outside us which could be studied with a distance, which requires that we should be free from our bias. Every sociologist may view the world differently, but certainly there is an objective world that resists human biasness, human subjectivity. And that way, this facts, value, objectivity, this debate has to be raised, and you have to talk about in terms of positivism and non-positivism. I hope that you have not only been able to develop the concepts, rebrush what you have already gone through, but many new data, the informations might have been provided to you. Tomorrow we'll pick up the certain strands and we'll talk about the methodology, and that way the classes will go on. If in between, if there is any problem, if you find anything to be required, let me know so that it will be provided. Every units will be there in terms of this. So the conceptual clarity we'll be talking about right from basic to the advanced. I'll help you develop the concepts, rebrush, reformulate, and also to look at the questions and write the questions in a more concrete manner. Now once you have gone through this one, when you have made the certain kind of point-wise notes, look at the questions, last year questions, and try to solve it, make a synopsis. Feel confident. And within these 22 days, things will be done by us, and we will be able to finish all this content which has been supplied to you in terms of the schedule which has been given to you, and that way the things will be going on. All right? Thank you.